So, the War of the Austrian Succession ends in 1748. Everyone signs the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, promising to be on their best behavior. Austria's Maria Theresa is particularly miffed because Prussia, under Frederick the Great, got to keep the resource-rich province of Silesia. She's basically sitting in Vienna, staring at a map and quietly plotting the most elaborate revenge tour in European history. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, British and French colonists are having a friendly disagreement over who owns the Ohio Valley. This disagreement mostly involves building forts on each other's claimed land and occasionally shooting at each other. The French think it's theirs, the British are certain it's theirs. Both sides seem to have misplaced the memo about that whole peace treaty thing. It's the global equivalent of two neighbors arguing over a fence line, except the fence is a continent and the argument involves cannons. Back in Europe, the alliance system was about to do something hilarious. For centuries, the basic setup was France versus Austria, with Britain usually siding with Austria to keep France in check. It was reliable, it was tradition. But Maria Theresa, still fuming about Silesia, sent her chancellor Kaunitz to chat with the French at Versailles. The pitch was simple. Hey, you know who's really annoying? Prussia. The British, meanwhile, got nervous about their king's personal territory of Hanover in Germany. So they did the logical thing and signed a defensive pact with Prussia, France's greatest rival. This, predictably, made the French furious. They felt cheated on. So they turned around and formalized an alliance with Austria, their enemy for the last 250 years. This whole mess is called the Diplomatic Revolution of 1756. It's less a revolution and more a chaotic partner swap at a royal dance, leaving everyone confused about who they're supposed to hate now. Frederick the Great of Prussia was not a man who waited for things to happen. He was a man who happened to things, usually with an army. Hearing whispers of Austria, Russia, and France planning to carve up his kingdom, he decided on a strategy of anticipatory self-defense. On August 29, 1756, he marched the famously disciplined Prussian army into neighboring Saxony. He didn't even bother with a declaration of war until he was already there. It's like punching someone because you think they were about to punch you. His excuse was that he needed to secure Saxony before his enemies could use it as a staging ground. He also kind of wanted the Saxon army and treasury. This move, designed to be a quick knockout blow, instead served as the official starting pistol for a war that would engulf 4 continents, a truly brilliant piece of strategic miscalculation. With Frederick's proactive invasion, Europe officially lost its collective mind. France, Austria, and Russia formed a coalition to crush Prussia, a country once described as an army with a state. What followed was a masterclass in Frederick somehow not losing. At the Battle of Rossbach in 1757, he faced a combined Franco-Austrian army twice his size. He defeated them in 90 minutes, losing about 550 men while inflicting 10,000 casualties. A month later, at Leuthen, he did it again to the Austrians. These were stunning victories, but they solved nothing. For every army he destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear on his borders. The war in Europe became a horrific grind of marching, sieging, and dying from disease or cannonballs, all while the British happily sent Frederick bags of money to keep the French occupied. It was the 18th century equivalent of funding a proxy war, and it was working perfectly. While Europe was busy with its continental slugfest, the squabble over the Ohio Valley had escalated. This theater of the war, known as the French and Indian War, had a rocky start for the British. A young, ambitious Virginian militia officer named George Washington essentially kicked things off by ambushing a French patrol in 1754. It did not go well. The British sent General Braddock with professional troops in 1755. He promptly marched his column into a disastrous ambush and got himself killed. The French, with their Native American allies, were experts at forest warfare. The British were experts at marching in straight lines and wearing bright red coats, which is a terrible strategy when your enemy is hiding behind trees. For the first few years, it looked like North America might just end up speaking French. The conflict was brutal, characterized by raids, massacres, and a style of fighting that shocked the sensibilities of European commanders who preferred their battles to be orderly, predictable affairs. The dismal situation for Britain changed dramatically when one man took charge of the war effort: William Pitt the Elder. Pitt was arrogant, brilliant, and suffered from gout, but he had a vision. He saw the war not as a European squabble, but as a global struggle for empire. His strategy was simple and absurdly expensive. Subsidize Frederick to tie down the French army in Europe, while using Britain's powerful Royal Navy to choke off French colonies and reinforcements worldwide. He poured unprecedented amounts of money, what would be billions today, into the military. He promoted officers based on merit, not just their fancy last names. He treated North America as the decisive theater, sending thousands of troops and the full might of the Navy to cut off Canada from France. Pitt was essentially betting the entire British treasury on a global victory. It was a go big or go home strategy that could have bankrupted the nation, but it also started to turn the tide everywhere. And then there was India. This wasn't a war between Britain and France. It was a war between the British East India Company and the French Compagnie des Indes Orientales. These were private corporations with their own forts, their own diplomats, and their own private armies. They were fighting over trading rights, textiles, and influence with local Mughal princes. The key figure for the British was Robert Clive, a man who started as a company clerk and ended up as a conqueror. In 1757, at the Battle of Plassey, Clive led a force of about 3,000 men against the army of the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dawla, who had over 50,000 troops and was backed by the French. Clive won not through military genius alone, but through bribery, conspiracy, and a conveniently timed rainstorm that soaked the enemy's gunpowder. This victory effectively handed control of the fabulously wealthy province of Bengal to a private company, which would then use that wealth to bankroll Britain's global war effort. It was the most successful and brutal hostile corporate takeover in history. Pitt's strategy paid off spectacularly in 1759, a year the British called the Annus Mirabilis, or Year of Wonders. It was a year where they seemingly could not stop winning. In Germany, an Anglo-German army defeated the French at Minden. The Royal Navy smashed a French fleet destined for the invasion of Britain at the Battle of Quiberon Bay. But the crown jewel was in North America. After a difficult siege, General James Wolfe led his troops up a supposedly impassable cliff at night to face the French army under the Marquis de Montcalm on the Plains of Abraham, right outside Quebec City. The resulting battle lasted about 15 minutes. Both Wolfe and Montcalm were killed, which is a statistically impressive feat of mutual self-destruction. But the British won, and the fall of Quebec effectively sealed the fate of New France. It was a series of victories so complete and so widespread that it looked less like strategy and more like the universe had simply decided to be British for a year. Seeing France getting pummeled, Spain decided this was the perfect time to get involved in 1762, a truly inspired decision. They backed the losing side, hoping to maybe grab some territory while Britain was distracted. This was like showing up to a party just as the police are arriving. Britain, now a well-oiled global war machine, barely broke a sweat. They just redirected a few fleets and armies. One force sailed across the Atlantic and captured Havana, the most important port in the Spanish Caribbean. Another expedition sailed halfway around the world and captured Manila in the Philippines. Spain's entry into the war achieved little except for providing Britain with 2 more valuable colonies to hold hostage during peace negotiations. Meanwhile, in Prussia, Frederick was on the ropes. His army was shattered. Then his salvation arrived. Empress Elizabeth of Russia died. Her successor was Peter III, a bizarre man who was a massive fanboy of Frederick the Great. He immediately pulled Russia out of the war and switched sides. This is known as the miracle of the House of Brandenburg, and it saved Prussia from certain destruction. By 1763, everyone was exhausted and broke. The Treaty of Paris officially ended the war. The results were world-altering. France was the big loser, ceding all of Canada and its territories east of the Mississippi to Britain. It was a national humiliation they would not forget. Britain, on the other hand, was now the undisputed global superpower, with a massive new empire. They had won. The only problem was the bill. The war had doubled Britain's national debt to a staggering £133 million. Someone had to pay for it. Parliament in London looked at the American colonies, which had just been saved from the French, and had a brilliant idea. New taxes. The Stamp Act, the Townshend Act. It all seemed perfectly reasonable from London. The colonists disagreed. So, in winning a global war for empire, Britain created the exact conditions that would cause them to lose a huge chunk of that empire just 2 decades later. A perfect, ironic, and deeply human conclusion to the world's first truly global conflict. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!